but 1 cup of water for a giant Apache woman, and her entire tribe came for the cowboy who helped her. Out on the borderlands in those years, folks liked to repeat one simple rule. If you see Apache, reach for your gun first and ask questions after. But Corbin Thorne, a man living alone on a small cattle spread in the red dirt country of New Mexico, did the exact opposite on that scorching afternoon. He did not draw his gun. He lifted a bucket of water and handed it to an Apache woman whose shadow covered half the well in his yard. There was not a cloud in the sky. The heat clung to the skin. The ground had cracked open like the wrinkles on an old ranch hand's face, and dust coated everything from the fence posts to the rocks far off in the distance. Corbin had just finished herding a few calves back into the pen when he heard a soft sound near the fence by the well. It was not cattle. It was not wind. It was more like wood giving under the weight of something heavy. By habit, he dropped a hand toward the gun on his hip, then stopped. 15 years ago, when he was younger, his first reflex would have been to draw. Now, past 40, after a war and too many sights of men dying over a wrong look, he had learned to slow down. Think first, step second. He stepped out toward the fence, and he saw her. She was not some lost slip of a girl. She was a woman built like the high desert itself, tall, solid, carved in strength. She stood leaning against a fence post nearly as tall as his barn beam, her body powerful enough to break it if she wanted. She was a full head and a half taller than Corbin. Her shoulders were wide, her bare arms thick with muscle under sun-browned skin. Her long black hair was tied low and dark with dust and sweat. Her shirt clung damp across her back, and her worn leather trousers were scraped thin at the knees. She had not fallen, but she held the fence with a big hand that looked large enough to lift a man clean off the ground. What caught Corbin's attention most was not her height or her strength. It was her mouth and her eyes. Her lips were cracked, dry as the dirt around them. Her eyes were sharp and alert, deep black, but behind them was the haze of someone who had been without water too long. She looked at him without begging and without anger. More like someone who had walked miles under punishing sun, stepped into a rare patch of shade, and had not yet decided whether to trust it. In that moment, every story Corbin had heard in town flashed through his mind. Apache raids on ranches, settlers shooting first out of fear, soldiers rounding up whole villages. If he followed the unwritten rule of the borderlands, he would shout, aim his gun, tie her up, then ride for the fort. But standing there, really seeing her, he saw only one thing, a thirsty human being. "Do you speak English?" Corbin finally asked. His voice was rough from the long day. The Apache woman nodded once, slowly, like the motion itself cost energy. "Enough to understand you," she answered, her voice low and dry. Corbin glanced toward the well. The water was low this summer, but still enough. He let go of the gun, stepped to the edge and pulled up the bucket. The rope creaked. The water splashed against the wooden sides. He filled a tin dipper, lifted it to her. "Drink," he said simply. "If you are planning to kill me, you might as well drink first so you are not doing it thirsty." One corner of her mouth twitched. It might have been a smile or just a tired spasm, but her eyes shifted. The wariness stayed, but something else settled in. Something like surprise. "You are not going to ask where I came from?" "No," Corbin said. "In this heat, the first thing to say ought to be that the water is clean, not who you are." She studied him for a few seconds, weighing him, then reached for the dipper. Her hand was so large it nearly wrapped around the whole thing. Her wrist was thick and strong. the wrist of someone who had pulled bows, lifted burdens, climbed rocks all her life. She drank slowly, one careful swallow at a time, the way people do when water has to be shared. Corbin watched in silence. He remembered how it felt to be that thirsty, back during the war, when a swallow of water could be worth more than a gold nugget. No one ought to be left wandering under the sun like that. "Enough?" he asked when he saw the dipper near empty. "Enough until you say stop," she replied, offering it back. "Anyone else with you?" he asked, this time with honest concern. "You traveling alone?" She paused, then shook her head. "There are others, just not here. I need to go back." "How far?" "Far enough that if you keep me here longer, they will die of thirst." Her tone held no blame, just truth. The words silenced Corbin. Whatever choice he made did not only affect the woman in front of him. There were people out there depending on her. He could call the soldiers and follow the rules of his own people. Or he could listen to the quieter voice inside him that said letting her go was the right thing to do. He sighed. "Do you need anything else? Bandages, food, something to carry?" She shook her head. "Only water." He nodded, pulled 2 more buckets from the well, and filled an old leather water skin he used on long rides. Her hands were swift and capable as she tied it shut, proving she had done this many times. "When will you be back this way?" Corbin asked, not sure why he was asking. She looked straight into his eyes. Her black gaze did not shy away. "If you are still here tomorrow, you will know." "Know what?" She did not answer directly. "Men like you are not common, Corbin Thorne." He blinked. "You know my name." "I am not so thirsty that I forget everything," she said. "White men in this territory like talking about themselves, even when they think no one is listening." This time, he was sure that slight curve of her mouth was a real smile. Then she turned and walked off with long, powerful strides, the water bag slung over her shoulder as if it weighed nothing. Her shadow stretched long across the red ground, more like the shadow of a warrior than that of any woman he had met. Corbin stood by the fence until she disappeared behind a rise in the land. The evening breeze carried dust and the scent of dry sage. He went back inside, set the dipper in its place, and tried to tell himself the whole thing would fade like any strange borderland story. A thirsty stranger, a man who shared his water, nothing more. But that night, lying on his old wooden bed, listening to the cattle breathe and the wind slip through the walls, he could not sleep. Her image kept returning, along with her last words. "If you are still here tomorrow, you will know." And the next morning, when he stepped onto his porch with his cup of black coffee and looked out across the valley, he saw something he had not expected. Not red dirt, not brush, not empty land. The earth was trembling under the sound of hooves, and 300 Apache warriors were forming a wide circle around the ranch of a lone cowboy. All because of one bucket of water he had offered the evening before. Corbin Thorne woke before sunrise to a strange sound, a deep, steady vibration in the earth like the ground itself was breathing. Out here on the border, anyone who had lived long enough knew that was not the sound of animals or wind. It was horses. Many horses. Far too many. He sat bolt upright, heart pounding in the same rhythm as the trembling floorboards. He threw on his shirt, picked up the steaming tin cup of coffee he had poured only minutes earlier, and stepped out onto the porch. The cool dawn air brushed past him, carrying the scent of dry grass and thin mist. Then he froze. The valley in front of his ranch, The same empty stretch of red dirt and scattered cactus he had stared at for years was now filled to the brim with Apache riders. Not 10, not 50, 300. 300 warriors stood in perfect silence, arranged in a wide circle that enclosed his ranch. The sun had not risen yet, and the bluish dawn light glinted off arrowheads, short spears, rawhide shields, and the feathers braided into their hair. No one spoke. No one shifted. Only the warm breath of their horses rose in faint clouds. Corbin's hand tightened around the wooden porch rail. The coffee in his cup was still hot, but his hand had gone cold. He knew what this meant. In this part of the country, Apache warriors did not gather in numbers like this for water, or for curiosity, or for greetings. They did not surround a man's home unless there was reason. Then he saw movement in the center of the formation. A tall, older warrior stepped forward. His back was straight as a lodgepole. His buckskin shirt marked with symbols Corbin did not recognize but understood enough to know. This man held authority. Beside him walked the woman from yesterday, Njoni. She no longer looked exhausted. She no longer clung to a fence post to stay upright. She stood tall beneath the pale morning light, strong as a carved monument, shoulders broad, steps sure. Her eyes were sharp, clear and focused. If the woman he met yesterday looked like someone who had gone too long without water, then the woman standing before him now looked like a giant warrior in her full strength. Seeing her like that, Corbin realized he had underestimated her by a long mile. She was not a lost traveler, not someone in need, not someone broken by the desert. She was someone important, someone powerful. Njoni stepped forward. The riders parted for her, opening a straight path to the porch. She stopped a few yards away. Even at that distance, Corbin could see how tall she truly was, easily over 6.5 feet, maybe more. If she stood by his fence posts, she could probably break one clean in half. Corbin set his coffee cup down on the porch step. He did not reach for his gun. He did not move any closer. In air this tense, even a twitch could be seen as a threat. The Apache leader gave her a small nod. Njoni took one more slow step and spoke. Her voice was deep, steady, and carried no threat, only clarity. Corbin Thorne. He swallowed. "Yes, that's me. My people wish to speak with you," she said. Her words were as sharp and precise as arrowheads. "I figured," Corbin answered, keeping his voice even. She studied him longer than he expected, not in anger, not in suspicion, but in a way that suggested she carried two weights at once: gratitude for the water he had offered and the responsibility she bore toward her people. The older warrior stepped forward and spoke in Apache, his voice deep and heavy like a stone dropped into a well. Njoni translated without looking away from Corbin. "He asks why you gave me water. You did not know who I was. You did not ask where I came from. You did not hand me to the soldiers. You simply gave water. He wants to know why." Corbin pressed his tongue to the inside of his cheek. He looked into the leader's eyes. There was no hatred there, only waiting. "I saw someone about to collapse from thirst," Corbin said. "Out here, water means life. If someone is dying of thirst, I give water. That is all." Njoni translated. The leader listened, then nodded once. The 300 warriors behind him remained silent. No approval, no anger, only stillness. Then Njoni spoke again, her voice lower but weighted with something deeper. "Yesterday, you saved me, but you also saved the people waiting for me to return with water." Corbin's brow tightened. How many people? Najoni drew in a breath. 13. All women and children. They are hiding from the soldiers. Corbin's chest tightened, not out of fear, but out of the realization that every choice he made now touched lives he had never met. He looked straight into Najoni's eyes. Can you get them to safety? She shook her head slowly. Not yet. Soon. Then she spoke the sentence that made Corbin understand. He was standing inside something far larger than himself. But before we leave, my people must know whether you are a friend or a danger. He looked around him. 300 Apache warriors, silent as stone. The slightest mistake could turn dawn into disaster. Corbin took a slow breath. I am not your enemy, he said, and I am no enemy to anyone who is thirsty. One of the riders shifted in his saddle. Najoni lifted her chin, sending a silent message through the ranks. The line steadied again. She turned back to Corbin. The leader wishes to test that, she said quietly, before he allows us to depart. Corbin frowned. Test how? Najoni looked at him, and her dark eyes held the depth of a night sky before a storm. With truth, she said, and with your courage. Corbin straightened. All right, if a bucket of water kept you alive yesterday, then I will not step back today when your people ask something of me. Najoni turned to her people and spoke in Apache. For the first time, all 300 warriors lowered their heads in a single solemn motion. Corbin had no idea what it meant, but the look in Najoni's eyes told him one thing. The real test had only just begun. 300 Apache warriors stood still as a forest of stone circling Corbin Thorne's small ranch. No one spoke. No one raised a bow or a spear. No one made a careless movement. The silence was so heavy, Corbin could hear his own heartbeat pounding inside his ears. He had lived through war, heard gunfire inches from his face, and watched men fall because they flinched at the wrong moment. Yet the silence this morning felt more dangerous than bullets. Najoni stood between two worlds, her people on one side and Corbin's porch on the other. She was taller than he was by a full head, her shadow covering half the steps behind him. But the way she stood was angled, almost protective, as if she was ready to defend her tribe or shield Corbin if things went wrong. It was a rare place to stand in a land that divided itself by skin and soil. The Apache leader raised one hand, and a young warrior stepped forward carrying a round rawhide shield marked with the tribe's symbol. The warrior placed it into Corbin's hands. Not a threat, not a command, but the offering of a test. Corbin narrowed his eyes. What am I supposed to do with this? Najoni stepped forward, her voice even. This is a trial, not to accuse you, to see if your heart matches what you did yesterday. What kind of trial? Corbin asked, watching her closely. She pointed toward the dry edge of the valley, where the ground dropped into a shallow, rocky basin. You must walk there alone. No weapons, only the shield. Corbin glanced around the circle of warriors. No gun. No. No knife? No. Nothing at all? Only the shield and the truth. Corbin exhaled slowly. And if I refuse? Najoni answered without hesitation. Then the trial is already finished the moment you ask that question. Corbin fell silent. He looked down at the shield. The leather was old, the carvings still sharp. It was not a weapon, it was a symbol. And the tribe was placing that symbol in the hands of a white rancher. Fine, Corbin said at last. I will do it. The circle of warriors shifted, opening a narrow path. No shouts, no stamping hooves, only the quiet movement of 300 watchful riders. Corbin stepped off his porch, holding the shield, leaving the familiar weight of his gun untouched at his side. He walked across the dirt, feeling each grain under his boots as if the desert itself was watching. Behind him, he could sense hundreds of eyes, not full of hatred, but measuring the worth of a single man. When he reached the rocky basin, the Apache leader signaled. An older warrior stepped forward with a small leather pouch filled with dark red sand. He threw it down hard, and the sand rose in a long crimson cloud. Nijoni translated, "That is the question my people ask." Corbin frowned. "A question?" Nijoni stepped closer. The dawn light reflected in her dark eyes, giving them a depth that felt endless. "In the wars that came before, Apache and white men both spilled blood on this soil," she said. "On this red sand is the land that remembers it." Corbin stared at the fading cloud of red dust drifting over the rocks. "My people want to know," Nijoni said slowly, each word as clear as stone. "Which side do you stand on?" Corbin looked at the circle of riders. He understood now. It was not a question about politics or which flag he followed. It was a question about his heart, about the man he had become after the worst years of his life, about whether the stranger who gave water yesterday would keep that same truth today. He drew a long breath. "I stand on the side of human beings," Corbin said. "Yesterday I saw someone close to dying in the heat. Not an Apache, not a white woman, just a person who needed help. That was enough." Nijoni spoke his answer in Apache. When her voice faded, the silence returned. No wind, no birds, no movement. Then the Apache leader stepped forward and touched the rawhide shield in Corbin's hands with his fingertips. A small gesture, but unmistakable. Corbin understood. It was acceptance, not friendship, not alliance, but trust for the moment. And in this land, that meant something rare. The leader raised his arm. All around them, in a long, sweeping motion, the Apache warriors lowered their bows. Then they lifted their open hands, palms forward, the Apache sign of respect. Corbin stood still, hardly believing what he saw. Nijoni tilted her head. "They accept you." Corbin let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. His shoulders dropped as if a stone had been lifted from his back. "So," he said softly, "I'm not dying today?" Nijoni looked at him, the corner of her mouth lifting just a little. "A man like you does not die that easily." Corbin actually laughed at that. A quiet laugh, but a real one, surprising even himself. The 300 warriors began to turn their horses, spreading into a long river of movement across the valley. But Nijoni stayed. She stood in front of Corbin, her expression no longer guarded. There was something softer there now, something thoughtful. "You did what many white men would not dare," she said gently. "You trusted in a person before trusting in your gun." Corbin tipped his head. "And you brought your entire tribe to my front door." This time she smiled fully. "Stu, tomorrow you will understand why." Corbin blinked. "I thought today was the test." "No," Nijoni said, turning toward her people. "Today was the day they looked at you. Tomorrow is the day you must look at them." She walked back toward the riders, her tall figure cast long across the red dirt, strong and sure, a warrior in every step. Corbin watched her go, a deep sense stirring in him that something in his life had begun to shift. And he knew one thing for certain. Whatever waited for him tomorrow would change everything. That afternoon, when the sun finally softened and the shadows from the mountains stretched long across the ground like dark ribbons. Corbin Thorne sat on the porch steps. He thought he would feel uneasy after spending the morning under the eyes of 300 Apache warriors. But strangely enough, he felt calm. Maybe it was because no arrow had flown in his direction. Maybe it was because the Apache leader's stare held no hatred the way he once imagined. Or maybe it was because Njoni's image kept returning to him. The way she stood in the center of the warriors, stronger than all of them, yet with something in her eyes that made him wonder if she was carrying a weight far heavier than her size. As the sun touched the horizon, a tall figure appeared near the fence line. Corbin did not need to look twice. No one else cast a shadow that tall. Njoni. She walked toward him, not on horseback, but on foot, each step steady and heavy enough to leave deep marks in the dirt. She stopped at the porch. Without waiting for an invitation, she sat down on a log near the door, lowering her head a little so she would not hit the porch beam. She was simply too tall for most things built by men her size. A small detail, but it made Corbin truly grasp how powerful she was. He poured her some water. She accepted it and took a small sip. "Today," Corbin said, "I figured I would not be alive by this hour." Njoni looked at him with eyes that were not cold and not soft either. Just the eyes of someone who had lived long enough around danger to recognize its edges. "Then if they wanted you dead," she said, "you would not die on the red dirt. You would die before you ever saw them." Corbin raised a brow. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It is not comfort," she replied. "It is the truth." They sat in silence for a while. The wind flipped a few dry leaves on the roof. Far off came the low sounds of cattle and the rattle of tumbleweed dragging across the ground. Finally, Corbin spoke. "Njoni, you said 13 people are hiding from the army, and you almost collapsed near my well trying to bring them water. I want to know what happened." Njoni's fingers tightened around the tin cup. Her hands were large, steady, and strong, but they trembled just enough for Corbin to notice. It was the first time he had seen her lose even a sliver of control. She set the cup down. "You know Fort Merritt?" she asked. Corbin nodded. "I served near there once. I know how they gather Apache families into small areas for management." Njoni held his stare. "Not management. Prison." Corbin said nothing. He did not try to argue. She continued, her voice even but carrying the weight of something raw. "I was born in the northern mountains. My village was small. We hunted deer, dug roots, gathered herbs. I grew up beside my father, a warrior, and my mother, who made salves for burns and wounds. I grew taller than most, stronger than most. People said it was a blessing, but my father called it a responsibility. He said the tallest person is the first one to be seen and the first to be shot." Corbin felt something tighten in his chest. "3 months ago," Njoni said, "the soldiers came. They told us we had to move to Fort Merritt. They said they would give food and water and safety." Her jaw tightened. "But they gave nothing." A long silence followed. "We were locked up. Little food, little water. Children got sick. Women cried. My father, who never bowed to anyone, could not stand it." Corbin's throat dried. He had heard these stories before in whispers, in rumors, but hearing it from someone who lived it was different, sharper, harder. "I escaped," she said. "It was not easy, but I am tall. I am strong. I know how to climb. I went to find water. If I did not bring water back." She paused. Corbin whispered, "They would die." Njoni nodded once. "Yesterday, I traveled too far. I did not stop. I did not sleep. I did not drink. I thought only of them. And when my legs finally failed, I saw your well. Corbin studied her for a long moment. In the fading light, she looked every part the warrior she was. Broad shoulders, powerful arms, a frame built from years of surviving the harshest country. But her voice now was fragile, like a wound still open. He asked quietly, "What about the others? Why did the whole tribe come?" She let out a slow breath. "When I brought water back, they knew I had met a white man. My father thought I had been taken. He brought 300 warriors following my tracks. To save you, to find me, and to judge the man who gave me water." Corbin rubbed the back of his neck. "What if they had thought I captured you?" "Then you would already be dead," she said plainly, without threat. Corbin let out a short laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it eased something heavy inside him. Nijoni tilted her head. "The trial this morning was not to see if you had taken me. They knew you had not." She lowered her voice, as if telling a secret meant only for him. "The trial was to see if you are a man they can trust in the days ahead." Corbin frowned. "Ahead? I am not connected to your tribe." Nijoni looked straight at him. Her deep, dark eyes seemed to hold an entire night sky. "Jean Corbin, you did not just give me water." She spoke slowly, clearly. "You are the first white man who ever looked at me as a human being." Corbin felt his heart beat once, hard, not from fear, but because the truth of it hit him deeper than anything he had heard in years. He swallowed. "Nijoni, this is all too big. I am just a lonely rancher trying to keep my cattle alive." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Yesterday, when you gave me water without asking who I was, you stepped into something larger than yourself." Corbin sighed. "And what is that something?" She placed her hand on her knee, a hand larger than most men's, and said, "Tomorrow my people will ask you for something. If you agree, you will never go back to being the lonely man you were." Corbin straightened up. "What will they ask?" Nijoni looked directly into him, unblinking. "To help them survive." The words "help them survive" hung in the air like a tight rope stretched between two people in two very different worlds. Corbin sat still with his hands clasped together, eyes drifting toward the valley that was slowly dimming under the coming night. He had once believed that the rest of his life after the war would shrink down to 3 simple things: cattle, a small ranch, and silence. But sitting across from the tall Apache woman, he felt that silence beginning to break. "Tell me what you mean," Corbin said. His voice was low, but no longer cold. Nijoni looked directly at him. The red of the late sun brushed across her strong features. Her face held the strength of someone built to carry weight, and the weariness of someone who had been carrying far too much for far too long. "Fort Merritt is about to move the prisoners," she said. "They are gathering the strongest Apache left and sending them far away. The road is long and there is little water. If we do not find a place to hide for a while, many will not survive the journey." Corbin tilted his head slightly. "You mean, bring them near my ranch?" "Not onto your land," she said. "You are not that foolish, but behind it." She pointed toward the red rock ridges that glowed faintly under the sunset. "There is a canyon back there. Not many white men know it. There is shade, cool stone, and enough room to hide until the trouble passes." Corbin sat quiet for a few seconds. then asked the question that mattered most. "And you want me to lead them there?" Nijoni nodded. "White patrols know our footprints too well, but they do not pay attention to the paths you take. They will not question the tracks of a rancher's cattle or a wagon hauling water. If you follow a certain trail, we can stay behind you without being seen." Corbin let out a short, tired laugh. "You know I would be putting my life on the line for this." "You think I do not understand that?" Nijoni replied at once. "I grew up in war. Every man in my village knew that stepping out his door might be the last thing he ever did." She glanced into the distance. "My mother used to say that bravery is not the man who shoots the fastest. It is the one who reaches out a hand at the moment someone needs it. Yesterday you gave me water. Today the tribe hopes you will give them a road." Corbin leaned back against the porch post and let out a long breath. "You know, I swore I would never get involved in anyone's fight again. The war took too much from me." "I know," she said softly. "But if you can save 13 people, the war will take a little less from you." That stopped him. The evening wind brushed across the roof. The last light of the day turned Nijoni's eyes the color of old copper. In that moment, her gaze looked fierce, sad, and honest all at once. Corbin could not look away. Finally, he asked, "If I refuse, what happens?" Nijoni did not try to soften the truth. "We will find another way, a harder way, a more dangerous one. And perhaps not enough will live to tell the story." Corbin's heart tightened. He had seen men die from thirst, from hunger, from the long road. He hated remembering it, but the memories came anyway. And he could not forget the look in her eyes when she drank that first scoop of water yesterday. The look of someone trying to stay alive, not for herself, but for those walking behind her. Corbin stood up. He did not promise anything. He did not offer his hand. He did not swear an oath. He simply said 2 words, "I understand." Nijoni studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to see which direction his heart leaned. He added, "I need one night to think. One night only. In the morning, I will give you my answer." She nodded slowly and rose to her full height, her broad frame blocking the remaining light behind her. "Good. But Corbin..." He looked up, her voice softened, steady and unexpectedly gentle. "Whatever you choose, I know you are not a bad man." Corbin said nothing, but as her shadow disappeared along the edge of the valley, he knew one thing for certain. Tonight would be the longest night of his life. That night, Corbin did not sleep. He sat on the porch with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, staring toward the hills where Nijoni had disappeared. The moon was a thin silver blade hanging in a dark blue sky. Far off, he could see small flickers of light. Not army fires, but the fires of a tribe trying to keep warm under the cold desert night. Eventually, when he could not sit still any longer, Corbin put on his coat and walked toward those distant flames. As he drew near, an Apache warrior stepped in front of him. The man did not raise a spear. He simply lifted one hand, watchful yet not hostile. Corbin nodded. The warrior glanced into the darkness behind him and whistled softly. From within the circle of firelight, Nijoni stepped forward, tall enough that the fire lit her like a standing column of stone. "Corbin," she said, "I thought you would think it over until morning." "Could not sleep," Corbin answered. "And if I am going to help someone, I ought to look them in the eyes first." Nijoni motioned, and the tribe opened a space for him. No one laughed. No one glared. They simply watched, curious and measuring. But something in the air was different from that morning. Lighter, less tense. Perhaps because they had seen that he did not run. The Apache chief sat beside the fire. When Corbin approached, the chief gave him a solemn nod, greeting him as a man rather than a white stranger. Corbin sat opposite him. A simple act, yet heavy as any oath. Njoni translated the chief's words, her voice low and steady. He says that if you have come here tonight, then your heart has already leaned toward the truth. Corbin looked into the fire, then spoke honestly. I do not know how much I can do, but I cannot stand by while 13 people die of thirst when I am still breathing. The chief did not respond, but the tightness in his shoulders eased ever so slightly. Njoni added quietly, he understands. A woman brought out a small bowl of water mixed with herbs and offered it to Corbin. It was not meant for drinking. It was a sign of acceptance. Corbin placed his hand into the bowl, a simple ritual that marked him as a guest by the fire, not an outsider. As the night deepened, they did not speak of war. They did not blame one another. They talked about the trail, the safe canyon, the shaded rock ledges, the small spring hidden behind a lightning-struck boulder. Ordinary things, yet matters of life and death for Njoni's people. Corbin listened, asked, and remembered. He saw the eyes of Apache children studying him with silent wonder, saw women pulling their blankets tighter against the cold, and he understood that this was not a fearsome war party. It was a community trying to live through the next sunrise. When the meeting ended, Njoni walked with him to the edge of the camp. Tomorrow, she said softly, if you say yes, my tribe will remember your kindness for the rest of their lives. Corbin looked at her. The firelight glimmered in her dark, wide eyes. And if I say no? Njoni's expression changed into something he had not seen before. Gentle, sad, but without blame. I will not hate you. It only means 13 people will have one less chance. The night wind swept through the space between them. Corbin drew a long breath. I will give you my answer in the morning, he said again. But there was no hesitation left in his voice. Njoni tilted her head slightly, studying him as if reading the thoughts he did not speak. Corbin, she said quietly. Yes? Thank you for not reaching for your gun yesterday. Corbin let out a small breath of laughter. If I had reached for my gun, I would not be standing here talking to you. Njoni smiled, a rare smile, quick as a spark rising off burning wood. True, but not everyone has the courage to keep their hand still. Corbin looked into her eyes, and he knew his decision for the next morning had already been made long before the sun went down. When the sun rose over the hills and laid a thin gold veil across the valley, Corbin Thorne was already standing at his doorway. He carried no weapon, only a large water bag, a hand-drawn map, and the calloused hands of a man who had spent his whole life on desert soil. Njoni approached from the east with a small group of warriors. The early light fell across her tall, imposing figure, making her look like a steadfast shadow carved against the sky. Have you decided? She asked calmly, as if she had prepared herself for either answer. Corbin nodded. There was a steadiness in his eyes that he had not felt in years. I will guide you, he said. I do not know what waits ahead, but those 13 people deserve a chance. Njoni did not smile wide or cheer. She simply bowed her head slightly, a gesture among her people far more respectful than any handshake. Thank you, Corbin Thorne. And so they set out. No shouting, no horses thundering across open land, Only quiet footsteps on red soil, the soft rustle of leather, and the steady breathing of warriors who knew how to move in silence. Corbin took the lead, guiding them around army patrol routes, threading through the stone ridges and cactus stands he had known since boyhood. Now and then, he stopped to feel the wind or read the sky. Small habits to him, yet life-saving signs to the Apache following behind. By midday, they reached the canyon Nijoni had spoken of. A sheltered hollow with shade from the cliff face and the faint sound of water dripping somewhere in the rocks. Not much, but enough for a small group to survive a few more days. When the Apache women and children stepped into the cool shade, several collapsed from exhaustion. A young boy stared at Corbin with wide, dark eyes. Not afraid, only curious. Corbin knelt and handed his mother the water bag. She bowed her head in thanks, speaking words he did not understand, though her eyes said everything. Nijoni stood beside him, arms crossed, watching it all. A white man and an Apache tribe, standing together without a single thread of hatred, pulled tight between them. "In our language," she said softly, "there is a word, bizad. It means a person of their word." Corbin raised an eyebrow. "And you think I earned that?" "After today," she said, her voice warm like late afternoon sunlight. "Yes." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of warm stone, red earth, and the faint trickle of water hidden in the rocks. The Apache chief stepped forward. He placed a hand on Corbin's shoulder. Not heavily, but firmly enough for Corbin to feel that this was no longer the touch of a stranger. The chief spoke slowly and with great gravity. Nijoni translated. He says that from this day on, if you walk onto the land of our people, you are not a stranger. You are someone who will be welcomed. Corbin did not speak. Instead, he bowed his head for the first time in his life to an Apache leader. Not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. When the sun climbed higher, Corbin turned back toward his ranch. No one followed. No one held him back. But he knew that after this morning, something had changed forever. He was no longer the solitary man of the red earth. And in the canyon, Nijoni watched his figure grow smaller in the distance. Her eyes were not cold nor guarded. They held the look of someone who would cross paths with him many more times. The borderland wind swept gently through the canyon, carrying the sounds of footsteps and quiet breaths from people who had just found hope again. And the echo of that day would live on across the frontier, where a single cup of water had bridged two worlds that were never meant to meet. If something in this story touched you, take a moment to subscribe. No hurry, just so that next time a tale from the Old West comes around, you will be there to hear it with me.